Good afternoon, I'm Roshan Sukram. This is Headline News on CNC3 and the TBC Radio Network. The Senate went into committee stage late last night as the government sought to debate several controversial clauses in the tobacco bill. The Senate remained divided on the bill after a marathon debate which saw the government eventually relenting on several of the proposed clauses which were deemed controversial. Among the concessions made by the government is to remove the ban on the sale of single cigarettes. The penalties for offences such as sale of cigarettes to minors was reduced from $100,000 to $50,000 for a first offence. The government also made concessions on fines for public display of cigarette products and the sale of tobacco at certain business places. Independent Senator Gail Maher also called on the government to explain why the legal age for smoking was 18 while the legal age for consent to sex was only 16. In his winding up address, Health Minister Jerry Nares expressed his concern that failing to pass the legislation would amount to failing the country.
With this particular legislation, we are given the opportunity to care for all our fellow citizens, young and old, children and adults. Most importantly, this is a legislation that protects the unborn child who is at risk of low birth rate respiratory disease and learning difficulties. And if we fail to pass this bill today, we would have failed those unborn children.
Minister Nares also said the proposed legislation was a step towards developed nation status. He called on all senators to support the bill and put party politics aside, saying this bill was for the betterment of society.
This is the time to reflect on our mandate. This is the time to think of the child in Toko, Debe, Karanaj or Kastara, the teenagers at our schools, the adults suffering from CNCDs. This is the time to think of the woman who wrote to me, who makes a plea for us to help her breathe. This is the time for Trinidad and Tobago to not only think about the future of our society and the protection of our people, but it's also to take our rightful place internationally.
Tutor is calling on the Education Ministry to immediately develop a plan to curb school violence. The call comes on the heels of yesterday's incident in which students from the El Dorado East and West secondary schools clashed in gang rivalry. Tutor says the issue of school violence has been allowed to fester for far too long. The Education Ministry has not yet issued any statement on yesterday's incident in which both schools were dismissed early. There are no classes at the El Dorado West secondary school today as school officials are taking precautions to prevent further violence. The National Parent Teachers Association has also criticized parents for not taking their role seriously and ensuring that children obey the law. Stay with us for another news update in 1 hour's time, and our network news is at 7 o'clock this evening here on CNC3 and the TBC Radio Network.